Good morning. Welcome to the Fireside Chat, Reflections on 6 Decades of Service to the Nation. Now please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson-Heckenberg.
Good morning and welcome to our program today. We are pleased at INSA and AFCEA International to co-host two extraordinary IC leaders for a moderated discussion about strategic intelligence, the evolution of threats and threat actors, workforce and technology trends, and much, much more. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and I know there will be a lot because we have over 400 registered attendees, please submit the questions through the question box on the right side of your screen. Our moderator will do her best to get to them. Speaking of moderators and extraordinary leaders, I have the pleasure of introducing today's morning's moderator, the Honorable Joan Dempsey, who is a trailblazer for women, entering the senior executive ranks of the defense and intelligence communities. She spent 25 years in the federal government, which included senior roles with the Office of Naval Intelligence, Defense Intelligence Agency, as well as CIA. During her career, Joan was also a political appointee of both major political parties. After retiring from government, she worked at Booz Allen Hamilton, where she rose to the position of Executive Vice President and Senior Partner. In addition to the many awards and accolades garnered throughout her career, Joan is a 2004 INSA William Oliver Baker Award recipient. It is my pleasure to welcome our moderator, the Honorable Joan Dempsey.
Good morning, Suzanne, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. My mother would not have done that well. I appreciate it very much. And I am delighted to be invited to what I think is one of the most interesting forums that INSA and AFCEA in partnership have done of late. And that's a dialogue with the Admirals Studeman, two extraordinary intelligence officers whose combined careers span almost 100 years of national security experience. Now, obviously, we won't begin to scratch the surface of their knowledge and insight this morning, but we will try to distill some of the pacing issues for our nation's security in our discussion. Let's start with Studeman the Elder. Good morning, Bill. Can you talk to us about how intelligence has evolved from the industrial age of 60 years ago to the fully global information age of today, and particularly the evolution of intelligence, cyber, and information warfare, and do it all in 5 minutes?
Oh, what a great challenge. Thanks, Joan. Let me say first, I want to reminisce for a minute. I entered the Navy through OCS. I reported to Newport in October of 1962, right in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I was steeped very early on the importance of strategic matters in the intelligence area. And so was able to reflect on how well the intelligence community later on in a retrospective performed during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Not a bad grade, actually, except for the fact that we did not know that there were nuclear weapons on board, 2 nuclear weapons each, torpedoes on the Foxtrot class submarines, 4 of them that were down in the Sargasso Sea or the Atlantic. And then later on, I think the major other nuclear strategic level crisis that happened in the period of time of the Cold War was the Iran crisis. Now, there's an area where Andropov, as the head of the KGB, thought that the United States was going to, and NATO were going to start a nuclear war, and he wound the country up, and particularly the intelligence services, to collect information, and they were on a hair trigger. And so these are the 2 strategic nuclear events. Intelligence did not perform very well in the latter case. And so I only want to point out that when you think about intelligence, strategic intelligence comes first, and then theater-related intelligence, and then tactical-related intelligence. So my period of the Cold War, keep in mind, spanning the Cold War I define as the 45 years from the end of World War II until the end of the Cold War around 1990. The Soviet Union being far older than that, almost 70 years old. watching the Soviet state with the high focus which the intelligence community had during that period of time, watching it move from obviously a very threatening power in virtually all dimensions to where it deteriorated toward the end of its life and finally collapsed in the 1990 period as the modern world essentially encroached on them, as essentially the West outpaced them. They knew it. A lot of that reflection, I think, was in what was happening in the context of defense-related relationships, but there were technology-related relationships, whether it's space, threats to the homeland when Reagan, who was a major factor in the collapse, declared Star Wars and a sense that the Soviets could never catch up. And so now we're living with the reborn imperial state, Putin, all the things that are going on around the Ukraine experience. A very dangerous time when, again, the nuclear threats are back, essentially stated and prognosticated by lots of people. We're living in an era where the whole issue of nuclear deterrence has changed its factors. We're living in the information age now. I come out of the industrial age where the relationship between industry and government was defined in a certain kind of way. You were making a remark at the beginning about the fact that it's too bad people can't go back and forth between government and industry. I think that's a very important point because while they're two different cultures, there's a strategic, vital partnership that exists between the industry and government. And we learn a lot of lessons when we leave government and go into industry that we wish we knew before. So I'm glad we're going to talk about that factor a little bit later. The government-industry relationship is critical to the strategic posture of this country, and it's critical throughout all this period that you've talked about. When we move from the industrial age effectively into the information age, the cyber age, the AI age, all the new buzzwords that we have to deal with today, and trying to define how intelligence is attempting to do its business in this particular time frame. So this history is really important, going through all of that time frame that goes to the collapse of the Soviet Empire in 1990, the emergence of the rest of the world, the problem, the refocusing of the intelligence community onto the rest of the world, probably left, really didn't focus on the residual new Russian state as it was emerging in this time frame as much as we needed to, because it was still making mischief all over the world, supporting communist movements or other kinds of incursions in other states here and there, proxy wars, et cetera, and propping up states. So we move into this new information age where there's restructuring going on our side, very important factors related, but we also move into the global war on terrorism. And this is a fundamentally different form of intelligence. Now we're having to refocus back, rebalance the intelligence community into dealing with the new major state threats of the future, which are our main competitors, the PRC, obviously, and continuing to be Russia, but also the crazy states, Iran and North Korea. So let me stop there and let's move on to your next question.
All right, Bill, thank you. There are so many threads I would like to pull from your comments, but I want to do a hard shift for a moment. And Mike, if you, I don't know if you're having problems with your, there you go, there you are. There's the Studeman the younger. Mike, your dad raised a number of points, and I can recall as an elementary student in the US in Arkansas, of all places, being very aware of the nuclear threat from the Soviet Union. We're not in that situation today with what is probably our pacing threat for at least the next few generations, and that's China. You made a recent speech at AFCEA where you noted that Americans are naive and ill-informed about China and suffered from what you termed China blindness. Very different from the environment that your dad just described about the industrial age and the threat from the Soviet Union. Do you believe that the intelligence community is doing enough on China? Is the national security community doing everything it can to inform people and warn of the threat from China and their threat in particular to our military, industrial, economic, and information security. In 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, thanks, Joan. I appreciate being a part of this. And I think these are really worthy topics. I do believe that we have not had conversations with the country about the full expanse of the China challenge to the United States and our allies and partners. There's a lot of quiet work going on inside government. There are decisions all the time that you will see in the news that allow you to, in a sort of an event by event way, get a sense that somebody's doing something about the China issues, the latest being restrictions on technologies for equity venture capital firms in key technologies related to AI and advanced semiconductors and things like that. But where I think we're falling down on the job is having those calm, balanced, objective conversations with the country to sensitize it to the nature of dangers, which are much more omnipresent than you would actually guess if you're just proceeding in your own lane, in your own stovepipe in the world. And I believe that that's the role of senior officials, government officials, all the way up to the White House, but it doesn't have to only be the White House, to be able to describe what we're dealing with. If you are listening to perhaps the FBI director, you'll get from him, you will get a pretty clear understanding of some of the dangers. And the director puts some dots together, he connects some things. But by and large, it's a topic that's almost being eschewed by too many others. And there's a weird, uncanny silence in the public fora about the true nature of the threat. And it really, I think, is up to officials to be able to be the one to frame it and to be able to highlight it in a way that we did throughout the Cold War in the 20th century. And until we frame it properly, then we're going to misdiagnose it, we'll underappreciate it, and we'll make decisions which in the long run may come back to haunt us. And so I do believe that's the missing element and the difference between the way today we're dealing with China versus the way that we dealt with the Soviet Union in my father's era.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge for us because we typically take threats seriously only after they're, I'm talking about we, the collective body politic, the collective intellectual community inside the US, only take issues and really get serious about them after there's been a crisis. And Bill, you referred to two crises that I think really energized people around the Soviet Union. I hope that Taiwan is not going to be the crisis that makes the body politic come together and be serious and united about China. But I do have that concern. I want to, this is not a very elegant shift, but I want to shift gears for a moment. And you have both made a very strong case for a competent, compelling intelligence community. Next year will be my 50th year of having a security clearance. And one of the biggest changes I've seen in those 50 years has been the role of industry. Industry during the industrial age built satellites, provided bandwidth, sensors, did a lot of things that were very important to our community and to our national security. But what we've seen in the information age is that industry is now permeating all aspects of intelligence. Although we are outsourcing a lot of the previous industrial intelligence capabilities to the commercial industry. I'm very interested, and Bill, I'll start with you, where you see industry going in the future as we mature the information age. And Mike, jump in if you have something to offer in this too.
Well, let me just say, first off, going to a high level, industry is critical, strategic. It's our major partner. Managing our relationships with industry is strategic to leadership in this country, tracking essentially what they're doing and where they are, optimizing the way in which we essentially acquire means. The intelligence business is fundamentally, I think, and except for the human side of it, a technology business. So we are forever required to optimize our relationship with industry. And I think that there are a lot of leaders in the intel community that don't really recognize the degree to which that relationship is truly strategic. I know that when I went to NSA first, which is a major acquirer of means and remains so today, and also has had to build major outreach engines to deal with all aspects of industry in every quarter, which I think is enlightened on their part. I had to essentially find a way to learn more at my level and move a lot of the strategic relationships with industry into the front office because they were in the hands of the acquisition specialists. There are a lot of things we can do to optimize acquisition. I have participated over my life in both industry and in government in some very interesting and innovative ways in which to acquire means. And unfortunately, in the acquisition business, we are often reacting. The industry guys have the technology, we have the problems. The art form here is to make sure that they understand what our needs are, what our requirements are. You mentioned why it would be good to go back and forth and have people have careers that can be in industry and in government at the same time, because there is so much interaction that's required in order to do that. Around industry and the acquisition process, there's a lot of bureaucracy. There is a lot of process, unnecessary process. We still want to acquire around big bang acquisition. I've sort of recognized later on in my life that I preferred more spiral acquisition. I don't think we know how to do the blitzing and acquiring means very rapidly today as we did in the earlier years. I think that we have a problem with multi-year. We have a problem with protests. We have all problems with the legal side of it. We need to clean up and constantly improve where we stand on essentially the government industry partnership. I have sort of 5 or 6 major criteria I think are important for intelligence. Leadership, strategy, organize for success, organizing the relationship between industry and government, optimizing it, making sure it's high speed, making sure we have the oversight required for it. We're spending the taxpayers' money efficiently is a very important requirement there. So let me stop there again. And there are a lot of people here who've had that experience, and it's something that I think is, again, strategic.
All right, thanks, Bill. I understand that I'm having problems with my video line right now, so clearly I have not excelled at technology from an industry perspective, but you can hear me, so this may be a better solution. Mike, you're welcome to comment on industry and the role of industry and your experiences, but I also want to expand this to talk about another major issue that we're dealing with in the IC, and that's the changes that are going on in the workforce. Not surprisingly, the zero trust sentiment that really permeates our society today seems to be taking hold with the new generations who should be coming into the IC right now. But their desire for remote work and the still very highly competitive job market, we're just seeing enormous pressures on our ability to hire and retain our workforce. You've been living with this. What advice do you have to IC and industry leaders for dealing with these issues?
Hey, Joan, can I tackle the industry one real quick? Because I do think that there are areas where the government is too far behind, and I say this because I can take a look at the Chinese and to a lesser extent the Russians. I can say that they're moving out probably faster than we are and harnessing everything related to artificial intelligence. And in the Chinese case, they've set out to be an intelligence superpower by 2049. They have done concept development, which is far in advance of US concept development. for intelligence. They've reimagined it. They've taken many of our ideas that may have started with net-centric warfare, and they have moved well beyond sort of the TC-PED obsession that we have within the US intelligence community. They don't just hunt for secrets. In fact, they say that's way insufficient to be able to actually have information dominance. Their view is the real secret is to get as much open source information as possible, and they've raised up the primacy of acquisition of data. And thus, if you wanted to have a TikTok conversation, we can have it with you. But the idea of getting massive amounts of data from many sources, including the classified ones, but then amalgamating those in a way that allows them to actually be able to run your analytics on top of them and be able to not only analyze what's currently happening and not only get predictive, but to move into the prescriptive world, where in fact you create such high fidelity digital twins of human behavior, of state policies, of military patterns, of sheer capabilities of unique platforms, that if you are able to make a digital twin out of those, you can essentially run in advance using the computer systems, right, to be able to look at courses of action that those other actors are likely to take, anticipate what they are, right, test as things change to see whether or not those predictive COAs, course of actions, are being followed by your opponent, and adjust accordingly as you go forward so that you can prescriptively anticipate and always be a step ahead of your adversary. And it doesn't matter if it's economic policy or military operation. This is where the Chinese heads are. They're talking about, you know, intelligence supra planning and parallel intel analysis and all these other things. And we have frankly been too, I think, firmly grounded in our traditional view of what intelligence looks like in the future. And I think we're stovepiped. I think we're not having those conversations sufficiently within the US intelligence community. So for those who actually have access to the technology, know what we can really do, I think the industry can help push some of these concepts forward so that busy people in government can see how it all hangs together, and we can really reimagine what we're going to actually need to do or will fall behind an opponent that has a different plan for how they intend to use that information.
So that's
so Joan, just to jump in for a second, you know, again, I think Michael's got something going here. To me, the issue, my big factors for considering where we are in the play relates to leadership. I think leadership needs to be looked at in terms of our ability to move down the road, to have strategies for this, to organize for success. I still think we have a problem making the proper adjustments here, to properly resource, but most of all to essentially do the governance, the strong governance required to move ourselves quickly. We're just not moving at the rate at which our adversaries are pacing. And so we have got to wake up somewhere along the way, and this awakening seems to be slow in coming. And so again, I think the intel community could lead the way, but it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take a lot of, I think, outside actions to drive. I think that we're learning a lot in the Ukraine operation that's relevant here, but again, our pace is not quick enough.
Yeah, I want to, because I did get a question from Nicole Pilkus of the NRO, who asked, do you think that the U.S. approach to strategic intelligence has changed from the Cold War to the global war on terror to the great power competition? I'll summarize your comments and say, no, you don't think it's changed enough in terms of how we are doing intelligence today. Is that correct?
Right. I think, first off, I think strategic intelligence is really so important that there ought to be a lot of focus on going there, and expertise and the kinds of things that Michael was talking about in terms of getting ready for defining actions around the strategic relationship, including the warfighting part. to me, focusing on the warfighting is one of the biggest deterrent dimensions of this, and the signaling and the other kinds of things that need to go forward in the information warfare kind of context. So deterrence is still important as a first priority, but then you need to be able to very quickly signal that you're capable of moving to warfighting with significant implications for the adversary. I'm not sure we're thinking our way through that in the way in which is required. And I know we do the gaming, but the gaming to me is just not enough. It's not continuous. It doesn't involve enough people. It essentially, and then below that, we have to move our way all the way down to being really threatening on the lethal side. The targeting needs to be really exercised and clearly defined and understandable even to the adversary, that there's great risks to him, that we have high capabilities in this area and are going to be accurate and that will have great implications for the adversary.
I would throw in that strategic intelligence and other terms we've used are very narrowizing, I guess. It's not a word, but you know what I mean. Because when we bound ourselves like that, we actually don't adequately compare ourselves to the nature of the challenge. So if you're on the Chinese side, you're like, yeah, strategic intelligence is one of many things that I want to instantly fuse to be able to have full-on awareness. I want to do continuous net assessment using all powers available to me, blue, red, white, green, all the colors of what matters, right, that would affect any decision. And I want to actually have that all integrated into one place. And then I want to use my computer systems to be able to then project forward the likely behaviors of this adaptive system, and then highlight what things are going to be more likely, and then continually test myself along the way to see if my predictions are accurate or not. That is the use of strategic intelligence, but strategic intelligence is only one part, one element of this larger amalgamation of information, right? So we don't bound it by intelligence. We don't bound it by, some other terms that we've traditionally used here. We're very good at following our rules in the intel community. We don't do economic intelligence, right? We don't do net assessment. We don't do a lot of things that our adversaries are not afraid of doing. And I think we're going to end up being shorted in the long term. We'll find that more and more things will look like the adversary's omniscient. And we want to understand why, because we didn't prioritize getting all forms of information in one place in a way that doesn't adhere to our traditional legalistic ways that we operate today in the United States.
But we also don't control every aspect of American society, economic, political, military, like the Chinese do in their own country. So I understand what you're saying, Mike. I think it's very hard to take that sort of approach in the US, but I don't think we even understand what's going on. So you've laid out a very compelling case for how we need to think differently. I want to get to it. We're getting some great questions. Jeff Selden with Voice of America asked, Mike, you mentioned that the public's not getting a full sense of the threat from China. How much of that can be tied to China's various influences inside the US? Are there certain kinds of Chinese influence operations that are making it harder to counter their influence?
Ooh, he's raised a taboo subject. You're not supposed to talk about the degree of Chinese penetration into United States today, but I do think we need to shed that. I think we need a strong wake-up call. We are deeply penetrated as a society. When you talk about the cyber IP theft, I've used the statistic from the National Bureau of Asian Research, which found that $250 to $600 billion of IP is stolen every year. Do you care? Because it would set you off on a series of actions that you need to take that are stronger than what we've taken today. If you're in Hollywood, I use this sometimes as an example to say, show me a movie that's one iota critical of China's place in the world, its rise, and what it's doing internally or externally around the world, and you can't find one, a movie or a TV series today. If you go take a look at the latest Jack Ryan series, you're going to find some old Russian trope that they have to pull out, right? there are countless ways that the Chinese have been able to use their strengths in buying companies, including movie distribution capabilities within the United States, to deny our ability to actually have the media talk about the China challenge in a way that's way overdue, right? That's an extent of Chinese influence over us. When I talk about Chinese psychological warfare, people are like, that doesn't affect me. And I say, you've all been affected by Chinese psychological warfare, including myself. When they say the East is rising and the West is declining, I bet you believe part of that. You're like, you know what, that might be true. Because of all of our challenges with polarization and domestic politics and authoritarian government's ability to move quickly. And so it's a question mark probably in your brain, and that's delivered to you courtesy of the Chinese to cast doubt in your own belief, in your own, and confidence in our own system of governance and our ability to prevail in the long run and protect the international system. The Chinese media presence globally is awesome, and it includes penetration, deep penetration in our own country. So anyway, I would just say the examples keep going on, and this is once again something that I think most of America is ignorant about, and they don't have to be, but we're not doing a good job of giving them a sense for how much China is inside the wire within the United States.
All right, thanks, Mike. I think we could do an entire session, maybe a week, on just that topic. We've had a couple of questions from folks about specific issues with the intelligence community. Mike Groen, a retired Marine, asked what you two think about the digital transformation and the future of military intelligence specifically.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so again, we're living in the cyber world, and the digital transformation is a threat, but it's also something, in my view, to harness. And it goes back to Michael's comment about strategic competition, getting on down the road with maximizing the government-industry relationship for dealing with these kinds of strategic matters. The pace of what's happening in the cyber information world, whether it's AI, machine learning, it's all the buzzwords that are out there, quantum, it is totally staggering. The world will actually fundamentally change. And we need to be out in the lead there. And in fact, you know, interestingly, we are in the lead in many respects. We don't give ourselves much credit for a lot of the innovation that is actually occurring right here or with our friends and allies and partners. And by the way, these friends and allies and partners are very important, and we need to open up and operate more, in my view, deeply with them. Since it's a Marine question, obviously it's an important question with regard to where the Marine is going, not only with regard to their power projection from the sea but from the land. And I think that that's an exciting thing going on in the Marine Corps. And intelligence has a very big role in trying to support that mission, not only with the context of intelligence's role in information warfare, either information defense or information exploitation, but also in the context of the real roles that we play in theater support for targeting and vulnerability analysis and all the other things that happen.
Yeah, Mike's he's the one that should be mic'd up and giving sort of the view there as the former lead of the Jake working artificial intelligence for the Defense Department. So there's nothing we could say that would add to his knowledge, but I do believe that he's right, that we have talked about our transformations. Our strategy documents are phenomenal. They actually say everything that's true. Where we sometimes stumble is in the execution and the implementation of those very strategy documents. We can't exhaust ourselves on writing those and then sort of fail to deliver the complete capabilities that we need. And in the military, I would just say that we still have an inordinate amount of money that goes into the platform world. And you can, if you judged us based on sort of digital transformation, you know, there's a lot of investment and capability going to automate our targeting process, to do fusion, to be able to do analysis in ways where we have machine-aided And so it's there, but not sufficient to task today. So if you go out with a carrier strike group or you go with other units, they still haven't seen the full benefit of the way that we intend to integrate all this stuff. And so we don't, time is not on our side. We actually need to come together, I think, and do sprints that allow more of that capability that we talk about all the time and truly field it quick rather than waiting for the perfect solution, like JADC2 way down the line. What are you going to use in 2 years, not what are you going to use in 10 years, right? And so I think his question actually is pregnated with frustration that maybe we just don't move quick enough on our own ideas. And I would agree with that assessment of where we stand.
Yeah, you've both pulled on several threads from the earlier discussion as well about acquisition, about industry and how we interact with it to try to deliver capabilities and how slow and cumbersome that is. I can't let the two of you get away without asking this audience question, and that is, what kinds of lessons learned do we have from some of the deep dives that occurred in Navy intelligence? And is there anything unique in the Navy's approach to addressing enigmas that we should extrapolate into larger intelligence issues?
Well, I would just start out, but I spent most of my life in anti-submarine warfare, undersea warfare, submarine warfare related intelligence. By the way, one of the few areas we probably still have an advantage in, and which has a sort of great play for the future. So intelligence support to undersea warfare and intelligence has always been a major hallmark of naval intelligence in terms of the relationship between the submarine community, the undersea warfare community, et cetera. And it's an area where I think we've managed to sustain a lead, and it takes a lot of heavy lifting. And we have done this for the entire 60 years that I've been in the business. I started out in an ASW squadron, was in CTF 67 in the Med. And so again, just picking an area where you have at least some residual superiority while you're waiting to blitz or mobilize in these other areas that Michael talked about. By the way, our ability to blitz and mobilize seems to be essentially the challenge at hand, but we don't seem to know how to do it. And so again, take advantage of the areas that you have advantages in, build on them, and move forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that the Chinese are realizing and have been investing in trying to eliminate our undersea advantage, and so we need not to be naive about where they are putting a lot of money in terms of seabed, water column systems, airborne systems, surface systems, much of it unmanned, designed with scale to be able to put more sensing and then response measures in the water to eliminate our long-standing advantage. Some people say it's 20 years out. I'm not in that camp. I don't think 20 years from now we'll start to see the threat. I think we're going to see it in the 20s here, and we need to be very astute in tracking all of the various things that they're doing. And frankly, we don't have enough sensors in the West Pacific or penetration to be able to do that successfully to the level that I think we need. I would also add, when it comes to naval intelligence, that what I've seen is the art of intelligence is just as important. The ability to actually know cold the strategic elements of a problem, the way that your adversary thinks and therefore behaves, how they perceive, how they run through their strategic calculus and decision making. Knowing that, but also having a sense of the operational nature of what's going on and the tactical things, and being able to connect those all together so you have a blended understanding of how it all fits. And then when you have that understanding, having the confidence, right, almost the boldness to be able to go talk to senior officers and maybe persuade them that our strategy isn't necessarily fit for what we see, or that we need to consider changes there. Naval intelligence has always been, I think, strong in that regard, and those two talents, to not only understand the dynamics, but then have an ability to do something about it inside the blue circles where it's really important for more senior people that aren't studying the problem as closely, need to be able to enact changes that are going to work for us. And to me, those are two of the more prominent traits of the naval intelligence community.
So Mike, on that point, and I didn't think we had time to ask this, but it follows on perfectly with what you just said. We got a question, obviously, from somebody inside this community saying that there is a concern inside the information warfare community that we don't have enough opportunities for junior intel and IW officers to serve at sea and get the tactical and operational experience that will allow them in the future to lead from inside the Navy. Do you agree with that concern, and is there a solution to it?
It hasn't been raised as a major issue in terms of throughput for people going to see how it works. I guess, my observation of that would be, well, what are you actually learning when you are at sea? Because many of the places where you're going to learn your tradecraft, particularly in information warfare today, are not there. You can learn some critical elements of it, but keep in mind, even on a carrier strike group, you're still at the tactical level. There are many more things you can learn in a maritime operations center at one of the numbered fleets that may be ashore, or in some of the other commands like the Navy Cyber Defense Operations Center and other places in Fort Meade. So you can develop your information warfare tradecraft and knowledge almost anywhere today. And sort of the question is how you want to sequence those. But the opportunities, I think, are still legion for those who really want to become expert.
Bill, any closing comments on that point?
No, I think that, first off, there's always been a special relationship that exists between the Navy leadership and the Naval Intelligence, Naval Cryptology, and now cyber information warfare community side. I do think that the Navy leadership has to step up and take some special care to nurture that. It's a two-way street to create that kind of relationship. And that speaks to where our people learn their trade. And I think that there's a lot of demand going on, but the leadership of the intelligence, a lot of the intelligence businesses are now essentially being overseen by people who don't have great long careers in intelligence. So the Navy needs to look to how it essentially is going to use its information warfare community, all of it. All of those communities deal with threats, whether it's intelligence or cyber or information warfare, or whether it's communications, IT, weather, oceanography. These are the threats of the future. We're living in the information age, so the Navy needs to adjust, and it needs to adjust quickly.
Yeah, I can tell you, I don't know the answer to this issue, and I don't know how to balance the operational experience against the tradecraft and the deep expertise that we need for the future. I will tell you that I spent the first 3 years of my intelligence career inside a Woolen Weber antenna, as close to forward deployed as women could get in the mid-1970s. And there has never been any experience I've ever had in my life that compared with what I learned in those 3 years. This has been a fascinating conversation. I'd love to be a guest at a dinner party with the two Studemans to hear this dialogue continue. You all have been absolutely terrific this morning. I can't thank you enough. It's been a riveting discussion. But now the time has come to turn this forum over to Louis Shepard, who is the AFCEA Intel Committee Chair, to close. Lou?
Yeah, I agree, Joan. Thank you for moderating what was a truly insightful discussion and really valuable, I think, to all the attendees. On behalf of AFCEA and INSA, I want to thank both admirals, Bill and Mike. Thank you so much for sharing the time. I agree, Joan. I think we all need to spend a long Thanksgiving weekend at the Studeman household listening to a protracted discussion of these topics. To our audience, thank you for logging in. When this webinar ends in just a moment, there'll be a survey option that pops up. Please take that survey and answer the couple of minutes worth of questions. Let us know how we did and what you'd like to see in further conversations from AFCEA and INSA. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.